I came back from the airport because I had forgotten my passport at home, but what I heard through the window between my daughter and my son-in-law changed my life forever. It was impossible to believe what my own ears were hearing. I had planned this trip for months. Everything was perfectly organized, but a simple oversight brought me back at the exact moment to discover the most painful truth of my existence. My heart was racing as I climbed the stairs of my own house, the house I had built with so much love and sacrifice over decades. I never imagined I would return like this, with trembling hands searching through my papers for the document that would allow me to escape my routine for a few days. The taxi was waiting for me outside with the engine running, the driver glancing impatiently at his watch. But I needed to find that damn passport, which I was sure was in my desk drawer. I ran upstairs, panting a little because at 66 years old, I don't have the same agility I used to, but the excitement of the trip gave me strength. It was my first solo getaway in years, a Mediterranean cruise I had booked after months of saving every dollar. My late husband Richard always told me I deserved to see the world, but we never had the chance. Now, 3 years after he passed, I had finally been encouraged to fulfill that dream. I slipped in quietly through the back door, trying not to make any noise. Emily and Kevin were visiting, as they did every Sunday, and I didn't want them to know I was back. I knew my daughter would worry unnecessarily and maybe even try to convince me to cancel the trip. She has always been overprotective of me, especially since I became a widow. I tiptoed up the stairs, heading for my bedroom where I kept the desk with all my important documents. The passport had to be there, in the second drawer, along with the insurance policies and bank papers. Everything was perfectly organized, just as my parents had always taught me. But just as I reached the second floor, their voices carried clearly from the living room. My bedroom window overlooked the garden where they were sitting, drinking coffee at the wrought iron patio set Richard had bought for our 20th wedding anniversary. At first, I thought it was a normal conversation, the kind all young couples have about their future plans. Emily was speaking in that soft voice she always uses when she's nervous, and Kevin was responding in his calculated tone that had always made me a little distrustful, though I never admitted it, not even to myself. But the words that followed made my blood run cold. I stood frozen by the window, hidden behind the lace curtains I had sewn myself years ago. My breathing became ragged, and I felt as if the floor were moving beneath my feet. "We can't wait any longer, Emily," Kevin was saying with a firmness I had never heard from him before. "Your mother is very healthy for her age. She could easily live another 10 or 15 years. We can't keep waiting that long." My daughter responded with a deep sigh, as if she had been carrying a huge weight for a long time. "I know, Kevin, but it scares me. She's my mother, after all. Although lately, I feel like I don't even recognize her anymore." "That's exactly why," he continued. "She's starting to make decisions on her own, like this ridiculous trip. What's next? Maybe she'll marry some old guy from her book club? We can't let her squander our future on old age whims." The words hit me like punches to the stomach. Our future? Old age whims? What exactly were they talking about? My mind raced, trying to process what I was hearing, but a part of me refused to accept the reality of such cruel words. "The lawyer says that if we can prove she's losing her mental faculties, we can get legal guardianship," Kevin went on. "And once we have control of her finances, we can make the decisions that really matter. This house is worth a fortune, and with her savings we could finally buy the condo we want." Emily was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. I held my breath, clinging to the curtains, internally praying for my daughter to say no, that this was wrong, that she would never do something like that to her own mother. But her next words completely destroyed my world. "You're right, honey. I already spoke with Dr. Evans. He's willing to sign the papers we need. He says that at her age, it's easy to argue cognitive decline, especially if we show erratic behaviors like this sudden trip." I could hardly breathe. My legs were shaking so much, I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. These were my loved ones, my only daughter, and the man she had chosen as her life partner, coldly planning how to take away everything I had built over decades of honest work. The sound of the taxi's horn broke through my thoughts. The driver was getting impatient, probably thinking I had changed my mind about the trip. But I wasn't thinking about cruises anymore, or passports. All I could think about were those terrible words I had just heard, about a betrayal I could never have imagined was possible. For 50 years, I built a life I thought was perfect, as orderly as a Swiss watch. Every morning I woke up at 6 o'clock sharp, prepared coffee in the same white porcelain cup Richard had given me on our first anniversary, and began my daily routine that never varied. I was a respected woman in the neighborhood, known for my punctuality, my impeccable garden, and my ability to host the best family gatherings. My house was my pride. Every corner reflected years of meticulous care. The plants in the garden grew lushly because I watered them religiously every afternoon at 5. The furniture gleamed because I polished it every Tuesday and Friday. Important documents were filed by date in the mahogany desk that had belonged to my father. Richard and I had worked tirelessly to build this life. He as an accountant at a textile company for 30 years, and I as an elementary school teacher for 25. We never had extravagant luxuries, but we never lacked for anything. We saved every dollar, calculated every expense, and planned every investment, always thinking of Emily's future. When our daughter was born, I felt that life finally had complete meaning. She was a beautiful, calm baby who slept through the night from 3 months old. I raised her with the certainty that she would be a successful woman and, above all, a good person. I taught her values, principles, the importance of honest work, and respect for others. Emily was an exemplary student throughout her education. She never gave me any serious trouble, always got excellent grades, participated in school activities, and had friends from respectable families. When she graduated from college with honors, Richard and I cried with emotion during the commencement ceremony. I remember her in her seafoam green dress that day, radiant with happiness, hugging us and telling us that everything she had achieved was thanks to our example and dedication. She promised that one day she would repay us for all the effort we had invested in her education. I never imagined that repayment would be to snatch away everything I owned. She met Kevin when she was 28, at a conference for her job. He was an accountant like Richard, handsome, polite, with a promising future. I liked him at first. He spoke respectfully and helped with chores when he came for dinner. He seemed genuinely in love with my daughter. Richard approved of him immediately, saying he reminded him of himself when he was young. They were married in a small but elegant ceremony in our backyard. I took care of all the details, the flowers, the food, the decorations. Emily looked radiant in her ivory wedding dress, and Kevin never took his eyes off her. I thought they had found true love, just as Richard and I had decades before. The first few years of their marriage seemed like a fairy tale. They lived in a modest apartment near the city center, but were always happy when they visited us on Sundays. Emily would bake the desserts I had taught her to make as a child, and Kevin would help Richard with small repairs around the house. We were a close-knit family, or so I thought. After Richard's death 3 years ago, I felt the world collapse on my shoulders. 43 years of marriage aren't forgotten overnight. The house felt huge and empty. Every corner reminded me of him. For the first few months, I could barely function. I cried constantly and had completely lost my appetite. Emily and Kevin were my support during those difficult times. They came over every day, brought me prepared meals, and stayed to keep me company on the hardest nights. My daughter slept with me for the first few weeks, holding me when nightmares woke me up at midnight. Kevin handled the legal paperwork, the insurance claims, everything I didn't have the strength to manage. Gradually, I regained my will to live. I started tending my garden again, resumed my cleaning routines, and began to cook once more. Emily suggested I join the neighborhood book club, take yoga classes, and do activities to meet new people. I resisted at first, but eventually I took her advice. Life began to have color again. I made friends at the book club, women my age who were also widows, and understood exactly what I was going through. I started to enjoy small pleasures, a cup of tea in the afternoons, a good novel, chats with the neighbors about the flowers in the garden. I even started thinking about traveling. Richard had always wanted to see Europe, but we never had the opportunity or enough money. Now, with the house paid off and some savings accumulated, I could finally afford to fulfill the dream we had shared for so many years. When I told Emily and Kevin about my travel plans, their reaction was strange. They didn't show the excitement I expected, but rather concern. They said it was dangerous for a woman my age to travel alone, that I could get sick far from home, that it was better to wait, and maybe they could accompany me in the future. But I had made up my mind. For the first time in decades, I wanted to do something just for me, without asking for permission, without considering others' opinions. I felt free, independent, capable of making my own decisions. Richard would have been proud to see me so determined and brave. I organized everything meticulously: the passport, the reservations, the travel insurance, the right clothes. I even bought a new suitcase, a vibrant red one, because it seemed cheerful and optimistic. I was as excited as a little girl waiting for Christmas. I never suspected that this excitement, this new independence that made me so proud, was precisely what was fueling the sinister plans I had just overheard from my own window. "The problem is, she's still too sharp," Kevin continued while I remained hidden behind the curtains, feeling my world crumble word by word. "But Dr. Evans says that doesn't matter. With a few testimonies of erratic behavior and her age, we can get her declared mentally incompetent without much trouble." Emily sighed deeply. "What if she figures out what we're doing? You know my mom, Kevin. She's smarter than she looks. For years, she managed the household finances when Dad was alive. She never made mistakes with the numbers." "That's exactly why we have to act fast," he replied with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "The longer we wait, the harder it will be to convince a judge, but if we present the case correctly, showing that she's making impulsive decisions like spending money on unnecessary trips, we can argue for impaired judgment." The words stabbed into my chest like sharp daggers. Unnecessary trips, impaired judgment. How could they talk about me like that? How could my own daughter, the child I had carried in my arms, nourished with my milk, comforted during every childhood nightmare, be planning to destroy my life in such a cruel way? "I already spoke with Susan too," Emily added, mentioning my best friend from the book club. "I told her I was worried because Mom had been acting strangely lately, that she sometimes gets confused with dates, that she repeats the same stories over and over." My heart stopped completely. Susan was my confidant, the person with whom I shared my joys and worries every Tuesday over coffee. Had Emily been poisoning our friendship with lies about my mental health? For how long had she been weaving this web of deceit behind my back? "Excellent," Kevin approved. "We need it to look like a pattern of concerning behavior. What else can you get?" "Well, we could also talk to Mrs. Gable, the next-door neighbor. She's always been a bit of a gossip. If I tell her I'm worried about Mom's mental health, she'll surely start inventing things she's noticed." The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. They weren't just planning to steal my assets, they were systematically destroying my reputation, my social support network, everything that gave me a sense of belonging and dignity in the community where I had lived for decades. "Perfect," Kevin said. "And don't forget to document anything strange she does. If she gets up in the middle of the night, if she forgets to pay a bill, if she gets a name wrong, everything can be used as evidence." My stomach churned as I realized that for months, maybe years, my own daughter had been watching me like a predator watches its prey, waiting for any slip-up, any normal moment of human vulnerability to use against me. "And what about the house?" Emily asked. "It's the most valuable thing she has. Once we have guardianship, we can sell it easily. We'll say it's too big for her, that she needs to be in a safer place with specialized care. No one will question that decision, especially if she's already been declared incompetent." Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but I quickly wiped them away. I couldn't let them see me cry. I couldn't give them even that satisfaction. This house was more than a property. It was the home where I had raised my daughter, where I had loved my husband, where all the most important moments of my life had happened. "And what do we do with her after that?" Emily asked in a voice so casual it was as if she were talking about the weather. "There are several options. We could look for a cheap nursing home, one of those where the government subsidizes part of the cost. With her pension, and what's left after selling the house and paying off our debts, it should be enough to keep her comfortable." Comfortable? They were talking about locking me up in a home as if I were a piece of old furniture they no longer needed, but didn't want to throw away completely. My mind worked frantically, trying to process the magnitude of this betrayal, the coldness with which they were planning the theft of my entire life. Although, on second thought, Kevin continued, maybe a private facility, but further away, would be better. That way we won't have to visit her as often, and she won't be able to cause trouble with the neighbors or old acquaintances. Emily laughed, a short, bitter laugh. I had never heard from her before. You're right. The further away, the better. That way, we can live in peace without worrying that someone might believe her if she tries to tell a different version of the story. The plan was perfect, diabolically perfect. They would isolate me from my entire known world, from all the people who could help me or believe my side of the story. They would turn me into a confused and abandoned old woman in a strange place, while they enjoyed everything Richard and I had built over decades of sacrifice. "When do we start?" Emily asked, and in her voice I detected an impatience that made my blood run cold. "Next week, while she's on her trip, we can start moving some things around. We'll go through her papers, photograph the important documents, maybe even take some jewelry and valuables without it being immediately noticeable." My breathing became ragged. Not only were they going to rob me legally, but they were also going to ransack my house while I was away, trusting them. They had probably already been taking mental inventories during their Sunday visits, calculating the value of every object, every memory, every family heirloom. "Be careful with Grandma's jewelry," Emily warned. "Mom knows it by heart. She would notice if any of it was missing." "Don't worry," Kevin replied. "We'll just take a few less conspicuous pieces at first. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late for her to do anything about it." The taxi's horn sounded again, more insistent this time. The driver probably thought I had changed my mind about the trip, but I could no longer think about cruises or passports. My mind was completely focused on this devastating revelation that had changed my life forever. I needed time to process all this, to plan what to do. I couldn't confront them now. I wasn't ready. I needed to be smart, strategic. They thought I was a naive old woman who was easy to manipulate, but they were about to find out that they had gravely underestimated Clara. I stood motionless behind the curtains for several minutes after they finished talking, trying to process the magnitude of what I had just discovered. My mind filled with memories that now took on a completely different meaning, like pieces of a sinister puzzle finally clicking into place. How many times had Emily casually commented on my supposed confusion with dates? How many times had Kevin insisted on reviewing my bank statements to help me? How many times had they exchanged knowing glances that I had interpreted as a couple's love, when they were actually conspiracies against me? I remembered that afternoon 2 months ago when Emily came to visit and found me looking for my reading glasses. "Mom, you're wearing them," she had said with a strange smile, but I clearly remembered leaving them on the nightstand. I now wondered if she had moved them deliberately so she could later tell that story as evidence of my mental decline. I also remembered when Kevin had so graciously offered to accompany me to the bank to simplify my paperwork. He insisted it would be easier if he had access to my accounts to help with monthly payments. I had interpreted that offer as filial love, but now I understood he was just laying the groundwork to gain full control over my finances. The times Emily had suggested I should consider selling the house because it was too big for one person. The times she had commented on how expensive it was to maintain such a large property. The times she had talked about the advantages of living in a retirement community where I would have more company and professional care. Every conversation, every suggestion, every gesture of supposed concern had been part of a meticulously designed plan to convince me to voluntarily give up my independence. And when that didn't work, they decided to take it from me by legal force. My hands trembled as I recalled Dr. Evans' visit last week. He had shown up without an appointment, saying Emily had called, worried about my health. He asked me strange questions about my memory, about whether I had been feeling confused lately, about whether I had experienced any episodes of disorientation. I had answered honestly that I felt perfectly fine, but he kept insisting, taking notes in a small notebook. Now I understood that visit hadn't been a medical consultation. It had been an evaluation to support their declaration of my mental incompetence. Dr. Evans, whom I had trusted for years, was colluding with my own family to destroy my life. When had this conspiracy begun? Had it started immediately after Richard's death, when I was at my most vulnerable and needed their support? Or had it started even earlier, while my husband was still alive, patiently waiting for the right moment to execute their plan? The idea that they had been faking love and concern while planning my destruction filled me with a rage I had never felt before. But along with the rage came a deep, devastating sadness. My own daughter, the child I had carried in my womb for 9 months, nourished with my body, educated with my values, considered me an obstacle to her happiness. Where had I failed as a mother? What had I done wrong to raise a person capable of betraying me so cruelly? Had I been too generous, too permissive, or maybe not strict enough in teaching her about gratitude and respect for her parents? Richard always said Emily was perfect, that she was the daughter any parent would dream of having. How would he have reacted to this betrayal? Would he have felt as responsible as I did now? Or would he have seen the signs I had missed for all these years? The sound of their voices interrupted my painful thoughts. They were saying their goodbyes, getting ready to leave. I heard the scrape of chairs being moved, footsteps on the patio, the final words of a conversation that had destroyed my world forever. "Remember, honey," Kevin was saying, "we can't suddenly change our attitude toward her. We have to keep being the perfect daughter and son-in-law until everything is legal." "I know," Emily replied, "although it's getting harder for me to fake affection when I see her spending money on unnecessary things like that trip. But you're right, we have to keep up appearances until we have everything under control." Faking affection. Those words hit me harder than all the others. For years, I had interpreted their hugs, their kisses on my cheek, their "I love you, Mom," as genuine expressions of filial love. Now I discovered it had all been an elaborate performance, a mask to hide their contempt and greed. I heard the front door open and close. Their footsteps receded down the front path. The sound of their car engine started and gradually faded into the distance. Only then did I allow myself to collapse onto the bed, my body shaking from the shock of everything I had discovered. The taxi's horn was still honking outside, increasingly impatient. I would have to go down and cancel the trip, make up some excuse. I couldn't leave now. Knowing what I knew, I needed time to think, to plan, to decide how to face this devastating betrayal. But as I headed toward the window to signal the driver, an idea began to form in my mind. What if I didn't cancel the trip? What if I used their plan to go through my things while I was away to observe them without their realizing it? What if I pretended to be the naive old woman they thought I was, while I was actually investigating the true depth of their betrayal? They had gravely underestimated Clara. They thought she was a vulnerable widow who was easy to manipulate, but they were about to discover that the woman who had built a life with Richard, who had raised a daughter and managed a household for decades, had resources and strength they couldn't even imagine. If they wanted to play dirty, I would teach them what it really meant to face a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. I walked down the stairs with firm, determined steps, though my heart was beating like a war drum. The taxi driver looked relieved when I appeared at the front door with my red suitcase and a smile that, though forced, must have seemed convincing. "Sorry for the delay," I said in the calmest voice I could manage. "I'm ready for the airport now." During the entire ride, I made casual conversation with the driver, commenting on the weather and my excitement for the cruise. But my mind was racing, planning every move. I couldn't let Emily and Kevin suspect I had discovered their plan. My only advantage was that they believed they had me completely fooled. At the airport, while waiting for my flight, I called Susan from a payphone. I needed to know exactly what Emily had told her about my supposed mental decline. "Susan, dear," I began naturally, "I'm at the airport about to leave, but I wanted to ask you something. Have you noticed anything strange about me lately?" There was an awkward pause before Susan answered. "Well, Clara, the truth is, Emily came to see me a few weeks ago. She was very worried about you. She said you'd been a bit confused about things." My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice serene. "Confused how, exactly?" "She said you repeated the same stories several times, that you sometimes forgot where you put things, that you'd had a few episodes of disorientation." I told her I hadn't noticed anything unusual, but she insisted it was very subtle and that maybe I hadn't realized. The poison was spreading exactly as they had planned. And what else did she say? She also mentioned you were making impulsive decisions, like this trip. She said she was worried because it wasn't typical of you to do something so spontaneous without consulting the family. Every word confirmed the depth of their betrayal. They had been building a carefully designed narrative to make my independent decisions look like symptoms of dementia. "Susan, I want you to know that I feel perfectly fine. If you ever notice anything genuinely concerning in my behavior, please, tell me directly, okay?" "Of course, dear," although I must admit, Emily seemed truly distraught. "Maybe you should talk to her when you get back." After hanging up, I went to the airport gift shop and bought a small, discreet audio recorder. If they were going to use my words against me, I could play that game too. During the flight, I mentally worked out a detailed strategy for the coming days. The cruise was emotional torture, surrounded by happy couples and loving families. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal waiting for me at home. Every night, alone in my cabin, I cried silently for the daughter I thought I had, who in reality had never existed. But I also used that time to strengthen my resolve. I would not be defeated so easily. When I returned 5 days later, I acted as if nothing had happened. I told Emily and Kevin about the trip with genuine enthusiasm, showing them photos and gifts I had brought back. They smiled and asked questions, but I could see the impatience in their eyes, the anxiety to know if I had noticed anything different in the house. And indeed, several things had been subtly moved. My desk documents were in a different order. A few minor pieces of jewelry were missing from my jewelry box. They had even taken photos of certain furniture and paintings, probably to calculate their resale value, but I pretended not to notice anything, acting like the absent-minded old woman they believed I was. Over the next few weeks, I began my own silent investigation. First, I made an appointment with my trusted lawyer, Arthur, without mentioning anything to Emily. I explained that I wanted to review my will and make sure all my legal documents were in order. "Is there a specific problem you're worried about?" Arthur asked, noticing something in my tone. "Let's just say I've started to question some things about the people I trusted," I replied carefully. "Would it be possible to make some changes without anyone else finding out for now?" Arthur, who had been Richard's friend for decades, nodded with understanding. "Of course. Everything we discuss here is protected by attorney-client privilege." I also began to secretly document every interaction with Emily and Kevin, every comment about my supposed confusion, every suggestion about selling the house, every question about my finances was recorded on my little device. Soon, I would have enough evidence of their pattern of manipulation. But the most revealing investigation happened when I decided to follow Kevin one afternoon. I had noticed he was leaving work early on Wednesdays lately, and my gut told me there was more to it. I put on a large hat and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous but determined to uncover the truth. I followed him to a cafe on the other side of town, where he met a young woman with 2 small children. My heart stopped when I saw him hug her and kiss the children as if they were his own. This wasn't a business meeting or a casual get-together with a friend. I sat at a distant table, hidden behind a newspaper, and watched for an hour as Kevin acted like a loving father and husband with this secret family. The children called him Daddy. The woman spoke to him with the intimacy of a longtime wife. When they said goodbye, he handed her an envelope that clearly contained money. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Kevin wasn't just planning to rob me to finance his life with Emily. He was also maintaining another family in secret. My daughter wasn't just a victim of his manipulations. She was also his unwitting accomplice in a much larger deception. That night, while pretending to watch television in the living room, Emily and Kevin were talking in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't hear them. My hidden recorder captured every word as they planned the next step in their strategy to have me declared incompetent. "Dr. Evans says he needs more documented evidence," Kevin was saying. "Erratic behavior, significant memory lapses, questionable financial decisions. We could hide her blood pressure medication," Emily suggested. "If she feels dizzy or confused, it would be easy to convince anyone she's losing her faculties." The cruelty of that suggestion took my breath away. They were willing to risk my physical health to achieve their goals. There was no longer any doubt that these people were capable of anything. But I was preparing, too. The war had begun, and they didn't know their opponent already knew all their cards. The confrontation came on a Tuesday afternoon, when Emily came alone for her weekly visit. I had been avoiding them coming together. I needed to separate the pieces of their alliance to weaken them. I prepared coffee in my best porcelain set, as I always did, but this time every gesture was calculated with military precision. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about your well-being," Emily began with that sweet voice I now recognized as completely fake. "Kevin and I think it might be a good idea for you to talk to someone about how you've been feeling lately." I placed the coffee cup in front of her with perfectly steady hands. "Someone like who, sweetie?" "Well, maybe a specialist. Dr. Evans knows some very good psychologists who work with people your age. It's nothing serious, just to make sure you're processing Dad's passing and all the change is well. There it was, the beginning of the next step in their plan. She wanted to take me to a psychologist who was probably also in on their conspiracy, someone who would officially document my supposed mental decline. I decided it was time to start revealing my cards. But gradually, "Emily, can I ask you something?" I sat across from her, studying every micro-expression on her face. "Do you think I've been acting strangely lately?" She avoided my direct gaze. "Not strangely, Mom, but, well, I have noticed a few things. Little memory lapses. Some decisions that seem a bit impulsive." "Like what decisions exactly?" "The trip, for example. You'd never done anything like that without consulting us first. And sometimes you repeat the same stories or look for things that are right in front of you." Every word came out of her mouth, as if she had rehearsed the speech dozens of times. She probably had. "You know what's funny, Emily? Susan told me you went to talk to her about my supposed memory problems." For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. "I was just worried, Mom. I wanted a second opinion from someone who knows you well." "And Dr. Evans? Were you so worried that you had to call him to come over without me asking for a consultation?" She was clearly nervous now. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup. "Mom, I don't understand why you're questioning all this. We just want what's best for you." I stood up slowly and walked to the window, the same window from which I had heard the conversation that changed my life. "You know what else is funny, my dear daughter? I found something very interesting at the bank yesterday." Her face went visibly pale. "At the bank?" "Yes. It turns out someone has been making inquiries about my accounts, asking about procedures for transferring funds in case of mental incapacitation. Don't you find that strange?" Emily stood up abruptly, spilling a little coffee on the table. "Mom, I think you're misinterpreting things." "Really?" I turned to her with a smile I knew was intimidating. "Then maybe you can explain why my grandmother's pearl necklace disappeared from my jewelry box, or why my desk documents have been constantly moved, or why you have copies of my house keys that I never gave you." Each accusation hit her like a slap. I saw the exact moment she realized she had been discovered, when her mask of the concerned daughter finally crumbled. "Have you been spying on us?" she managed to ask, her voice no longer sweet. "I don't need to spy in my own house, Emily. I just need to pay attention to what's happening under my own roof." Just then, as if summoned by telepathy, Kevin arrived. I heard him use his key to get in, confirming my suspicions that they had free access to my house when I wasn't there. His footsteps went straight to the living room, where he found us in the middle of our confrontation. "What's going on here?" he asked, but his tone wasn't one of genuine confusion. It was the tone of someone who knew exactly what was happening and was assessing how much damage had been done. "Your wife was just explaining to me why she thinks I need psychological help," I replied with a calm I didn't feel. "And I was telling her about my visit to the bank." Kevin exchanged a quick glance with Emily, a silent communication that confirmed my worst suspicions about their coordination. "Clara, I think there's a misunderstanding." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding, Kevin. In fact, I think I finally understand everything perfectly." I walked to my desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out a folder I had been preparing for weeks. "For example, I understand that you've been visiting a woman named Maria on Wednesday afternoons. A woman with 2 children who call you Daddy." The color completely drained from his face. Emily looked at him in genuine shock, clearly knowing nothing about his secret family. "What is she talking about? Hasn't your wonderful husband told you, dear? Kevin has been maintaining another family for at least 3 years. The children are about 5 and 7 years old." "How long have you two been married?" 6 years, Emily whispered, and I saw the exact moment she realized her marriage had been a lie from the beginning. "Exactly, which means Kevin already had this other family when he married you. Did you ever wonder where he got the money to support 2 households on the accountant's salary he claims to have?" Kevin finally found his voice, but it was no longer that of the charming son-in-law I had pretended to know. "This is none of your business, you nosy old woman." "Ah, there's the real personality you've been hiding," I smiled with satisfaction as his mask finally fell. "You know what else I discovered, Kevin? You're not an accountant at the company where you said you worked. In fact, that company closed down 2 years ago." Emily collapsed onto the sofa, her face in her hands. "What else have you been lying about?" "Oh, my dear," I said with a compassion that was completely genuine for the first time in weeks. "You are also a victim of this man. But unfortunately, that doesn't change the fact that you chose to betray me to benefit him." The room filled with a tense, dangerous silence. The three of us knew there was no turning back, that all the cards were on the table, and that the open war had finally begun. Kevin stood up abruptly, his fists clenched and an expression on his face I had never seen before. There was nothing left of the polite, charming son-in-law I had known for years. "You know what, old lady? I'm tired of pretending I care about you. You should have just kept your mouth shut and let things run their natural course." Emily looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Kevin, what are you saying?" "I'm saying your mother is an annoying obstacle who should have accepted her place a long time ago." His voice had a cruelty that made my blood run cold. Women her age should be grateful that someone is looking after them, not playing detective. But before I could respond, the doorbell rang. The three of us froze, as if caught in the act which, in a way, was exactly what had happened. "Are you expecting someone?" Emily asked in a trembling voice. I smiled with the first genuine satisfaction I had felt in weeks. "As a matter of fact, yes. Excuse me for a moment." When I opened the door, Arthur was standing on the threshold with a young woman in a suit I didn't immediately recognize. "Clara, looks like we arrived just in time." "Perfectly on time," I confirmed. "Emily, Kevin, I'd like to introduce you to my lawyer, Arthur, whom you already know, and Detective Miller, whom I've hired for the past few weeks." The shock on their faces was evident. Kevin tried to regain his composure, but it was too late. "I don't understand what's happening here." Detective Miller took a folder out of her briefcase. "Mr. Martin, for the last 3 weeks, we have been investigating your financial and personal activities at Mrs. Clara's request. We have photographic evidence of your meetings with Maria Mendez and her children, records of bank transfers to her account, and full documentation of your fraudulent employment." Emily stood up slowly, as if in a trance. "Mom, how long have you known all this?" "Since the day I supposedly left for my trip, when I came back for my passport and heard you two planning how to steal my entire life." "But you went on the trip?" she protested weakly. "Yes, I did. But not before installing hidden security cameras throughout the house and hiring professionals to document your every move while I was away." Arthur opened his own folder. "We have video recordings of both of you going through Clara's private documents, photographing her belongings, and removing jewelry and valuables. We also have the audio recordings of your conversations about plans to have her declared mentally incompetent." Kevin finally lost his composure completely. "This is ridiculous. Emily is her daughter. She has a right to be concerned about her mother's well-being." "Concerned?" Detective Miller smiled coldly. "Is that what you call conspiring to commit fraud, theft, and kidnapping? Because that's exactly what we documented." "Kidnapping?" Emily asked in a broken voice. "Yes, dear," I answered with genuine sadness. "Planning to have me involuntarily committed to a mental institution based on fabricated evidence constitutes kidnapping under the law." At that moment, as if the situation couldn't get more dramatic, someone else knocked on the door. This time, it was Arthur who went to open it, returning with a woman I recognized immediately from my surveillance photos. It was Maria, Kevin's other secret family. "Excuse the interruption," Maria said, her voice firm but nervous. "I'm Maria Mendez, and I need to speak with Kevin immediately." Kevin turned a shade of green. "Maria, what are you doing here?" "I came because I finally found out the whole truth about you, Kevin. And also because this lady," she pointed to Detective Miller, "came and asked me questions that opened my eyes completely." Emily looked back and forth between Kevin and Maria, as if watching a surreal movie. She asked Maria, "How long have you been married to him?" "Married?" Maria laughed bitterly. "He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife had taken everything in the settlement, and that's why we couldn't get officially married until his financial situation improved." She turned to Emily. "Who are you?" "I'm his wife," Emily whispered, "his legal wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Maria leaned against the wall as if she had been physically struck. "His wife? But we've been together for 4 years. My children think he's their father." "Emily and Kevin have been married for 6 years, I informed her gently. "Which means you have both been victims of this man's lies this entire time." Detective Miller seized the moment to continue her report. Our investigation reveals that Kevin has been using the money he obtained from Emily and the small amounts he stole from Clara to maintain his double life. But that wasn't enough for his needs, which is why he developed this plan to access Clara's entire estate. Maria turned to Kevin with a palpable fury. Are you telling me that all this time you've been stealing from an old woman to give money to me and my children? It's not theft, Kevin protested desperately. It was just a temporary reallocation of resources. Temporary reallocation? Arthur laughed without humor. Fraudulently planning to have someone declared mentally incompetent to steal their assets is not a temporary reallocation. It's a federal crime. At that moment, I saw something I didn't expect. Emily stood up slowly and walked toward Kevin. For a second, I thought she was going to defend him, to stand by him despite everything that had been revealed. Instead, she slapped him across the face, a sound that echoed through the room. You are a liar, a thief, and a manipulator, she screamed, in a voice I hadn't heard since she was a little girl throwing tantrums. You made me an accomplice in betraying my own mother for money that wasn't even for us. But to support your other family, Kevin touched his cheek in genuine shock. Emily, I can explain all of this. There's nothing to explain, Maria interjected. Your lies have ruined too many people's lives. My children are going to grow up wondering why their father disappeared from their lives. Detective Miller closed her folder with professional satisfaction. Mr. Martin, I have here an arrest warrant for fraud, attempted theft, and conspiracy. I also have orders to freeze all of your bank accounts while the origin of the funds is investigated. The arrival of police officers transformed my living room into a scene from a crime movie. Kevin was handcuffed while protesting his innocence with a desperation that was almost pathetic to watch. His shouts about misunderstandings and conspiracies against him echoed through the house as they led him out to the patrol car. Emily had completely broken down on the sofa, crying in a way I hadn't seen since she was a small child. Maria stood by the window, hugging herself as she watched the man who had destroyed her life and her children's lives being taken away. Detective Miller continued to meticulously document everything, preparing the case that would ensure Kevin paid for every one of his crimes. Arthur approached me with an expression of admiration mixed with concern. Clara, I must admit, you handled this brilliantly. But how are you feeling now that everything is out in the open? It was a complex question. On one hand, I felt a deep satisfaction in seeing justice finally being served. Kevin had manipulated and hurt too many people and deserved to face the consequences of his actions. But on the other hand, looking at my shattered daughter and the traumatized Maria, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sadness for all the damage that had been caused. I feel relieved that the truth is out, I answered honestly, but also devastated by everything that has been lost in the process. Detective Miller put away her documents and came over. Mrs. Clara, I want you to know that your courage to investigate and confront this situation likely saved not only your assets, but also prevented Kevin from victimizing other people. Our investigation revealed he had been exploring similar schemes with other widows in the community. That information struck me deeply. I hadn't been the only one on his list of potential victims. How many other women my age might have suffered what I was about to suffer if I hadn't discovered his plans in time? Maria finally spoke, her voice broken but determined. Mrs. Clara, I want to apologize for everything that has happened. I knew nothing about you or Kevin's plans. If I had known the money he gave us came from criminal activities, I never would have accepted it. I went to her and gently touched her arm. My dear, you are also a victim of this man. You have nothing to apologize for. We have both been deceived by someone who was an expert at manipulation. What's going to happen to my children? She asked, tears in her eyes. They love Kevin like a father. How do I explain to them that it was all a lie? It was a heartbreaking question with no easy answers. Children are resilient, I said, though I knew it sounded inadequate. With love and support, they can get through this. And maybe now they'll have the chance to know their real father, without Kevin's lies getting in the way. Arthur intervened with practical information. Maria, as part of the investigation, will be able to trace the funds Kevin provided you. If that money came from criminal activities, the state may be able to offer some form of compensation or assistance during the transition. Emily finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Mom, I don't know how to ask for your forgiveness for what I've done. There are no words to express how sorry I am. I sat down next to her, feeling the weight of all the years we had lost because of Kevin's manipulations. Emily, I need to understand something. Did you ever truly believe I was losing my mental faculties? Or did you always know you were lying? She covered her face with her hands. At first, Kevin convinced me that you were really showing signs of confusion. He said it was normal that I didn't notice them because I saw you so often, but that he could see it more objectively. Slowly, I started looking for evidence of what he was saying, and when I couldn't find it, he would convince me that I had missed it or misinterpreted it. It was a sophisticated psychological manipulation technique. Kevin had gradually brainwashed my daughter, making her doubt her own perception and judgment. And when did you realize it wasn't true? I think deep down I always knew something was wrong. But Kevin was so convincing, so sure of himself. And honestly, the idea of having access to your estate was tempting. We're in debt up to our eyeballs, Mom. Kevin told me it was the only way to save our future. Detective Miller took careful notes. That's the exact pattern we see in financial manipulation cases. The perpetrator identifies financial and emotional vulnerabilities, then systematically exploits them. Arthur opened a new folder. Clara, there's something else we need to discuss. During our investigation, we discovered that Kevin had started forging your signature on some bank documents. Fortunately, we stopped him before he could make any significant transfers. But we need to make sure all your accounts are secure. The revelation that he had been forging my signature hit me like another slap. What kind of documents? Change of beneficiary forms. Applications for additional credit cards. Some inquiries about loans against the value of your house. He was preparing multiple avenues to access your funds once he had legal control. Maria shook her head in disbelief. How could I have been so blind? All the signs were there, but I wanted to believe his lies because the alternative was facing that I was raising my children alone. Don't blame yourself, I told her firmly. Kevin was an experienced predator. He knew exactly how to manipulate our hopes and fears. Detective Miller closed her notebook. With all the evidence we've gathered, Kevin will face multiple charges: bank fraud, forgery, attempted kidnapping, and possibly more as the investigation continues. We're talking about a significant prison sentence. As the officers finished processing the scene, I realized that although I had won this battle, the emotional scars would take a long time to heal. My relationship with Emily was damaged, perhaps irreparably. Maria and her children would have to rebuild their lives from scratch, and I would have to learn to trust again after this devastating betrayal. But for the first time in months, I felt in control of my own life again. 6 months later, I was sitting at my favorite cafe with Susan, observing how life had taken turns I could never have imagined. Kevin's trial had ended the previous week with a sentence of 12 years in prison for multiple counts of fraud and forgery. Justice had been served, but the emotional wounds were still healing slowly. Susan stirred her coffee with a thoughtful expression. You know what impresses me most about this whole situation, Clara? The way you handled everything. I never saw you coming. I laughed softly, the first genuine laugh I'd had in a long time. I didn't see me coming either, to be honest. I don't think I even knew what I was capable of until I was forced to find out. My relationship with Emily had been the most complex aspect of this whole experience. For the first few months after Kevin's arrest, we had barely spoken. She was dealing with the divorce, personal bankruptcy, and psychological therapy to process years of emotional manipulation. I needed space to heal from the betrayal and decide if it was possible to rebuild our mother-daughter relationship. Have you heard from Emily lately? Susan asked, as if she had read my mind. We spoke on the phone last week, I answered carefully. She's living in a small apartment downtown, working double shifts to pay off her debts. Therapy seems to be helping her understand how Kevin manipulated her perception of reality for so long. It was strange to talk about my own daughter as if she were a distant acquaintance, but that was the current reality of our relationship. Forgiveness was a gradual process, and although I had begun to forgive her intellectually, my heart still needed time to fully heal. And what about Maria and her children? That's a more hopeful story. Maria turned out to be an incredibly strong woman. She managed to locate the biological father of her children, who had been looking for them for years. Kevin had told him she had died in an accident, while he told her that he had abandoned them. Susan shook her head in disgust. That man was truly evil. He was. But what's amazing is that Maria and I have developed a genuine friendship. We meet for lunch once a month, and her children call me Grandma Clara. It's strange how something so destructive can eventually create unexpected connections. The irony was not lost on me. I had gained a sort of substitute family through the betrayal of my biological one. Maria's children, aged 5 and 7, had accepted my presence in their lives with the natural ease of children. To them, I was just another caring adult who had appeared in their world, not a symbol of their fake father's lies. "And your travel plans?" Susan asked with a knowing smile. "Are you still thinking of exploring the world?" "In fact, I have reservations for a tour of Greece next month," I said, feeling proud. "And Maria is going to house sit for me while I'm away." It's funny how life gives you exactly what you need when you least expect it. We had decided that Susan would stay over a few nights too, turning my absence into a sort of extended get-together for friends. The idea of having trusted women looking after my home gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. "Aren't you afraid to travel alone at your age?" Susan asked, repeating the same question Emily and Kevin had used to manipulate me. "I'm 66, not 96, I replied firmly. "And after everything I've faced this year, what could be more frightening than discovering your own daughter was planning to steal your entire life?" We had decided to keep the most sordid details of the case out of the public eye to protect Maria's children, but the community knew enough that my reputation had completely changed. I was no longer seen as the vulnerable widow who needed protection, but as the sharp woman who had unmasked a sophisticated criminal. "You know what's the most liberating part of all this?" I said. "For the first time in decades, I'm making decisions based solely on what I want, not on what others expect of me or how my decisions will affect them." Susan nodded in understanding. "It's like you've rediscovered parts of yourself you forgot existed." "Exactly. For years I was a wife, a mother, a daughter-in-law, a neighbor always defined by my relationships with others. Now, I'm rediscovering who Clara is as an independent individual. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time." My phone rang, interrupting our thoughts. It was Arthur with news about the final settlement of Kevin's assets. "Clara, I have good news. We managed to recover almost all the money he stole from you, plus interest. We were also able to secure a compensation fund for Maria and her children." After I hung up, I realized this chapter of my life was finally closing. All the loose ends were being tied up. All the accounts were being settled. It was time to look forward instead of back. "Do you have any regrets?" Susan asked as we walked back to our cars. I stopped and thought carefully about her question. Regrets? Not about how I handled the situation once I found out the truth. But I do regret not trusting my instincts more during all those years. There were signs, little things that bothered me about Kevin, but I ignored them because I wanted Emily to be happy. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the street as I reflected on everything I had learned. I think the greatest gift this terrible experience gave me was the confirmation that I am stronger and more capable than I ever believed. For years, I saw myself as someone who needed protection and care, but it turns out I am perfectly capable of protecting and caring for myself. That night, as I prepared for bed in my quiet but no longer lonely house, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back had the same 66-year-old face, but her eyes had a strength and determination that hadn't been there before. Tomorrow, I would start packing for Greece. The following week, I had an appointment to learn how to use a computer. The next month, Maria and I had planned to take dance classes together. My life was filled with new and exciting possibilities. I went to bed that night with a deep sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I was alone in my house, but for the first time in a long time, that solitude felt like freedom instead of abandonment. I had survived the deepest betrayal imaginable and had come out the other side stronger and wiser. I am alone, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, but for the first time, I am at peace. Apologize or get out of my house. Those were the words my son shouted at me after his wife staged an entire scene of crying and humiliation in front of me. It all started at their house. I had arrived for a family dinner that Saturday evening. Jessica was there, sitting on her outrageously expensive sofa in her designer dress and that fake smile she always gives me when Ethan is looking, a smile that vanishes the instant he turns his head. Dinner was awkward, as always. Jessica talked nonstop about her wealthy friends, her trips, the latest piece of jewelry Ethan had bought her, a diamond necklace that cost $8,000. She said it 3 times during dinner. $8,000. As if she needed me to know exactly how much it was worth, as if she needed to rub it in my face that she has the money and the power in that relationship. I tried to eat in silence. I nodded when necessary. I smiled when I was supposed to. I did everything possible to avoid conflict. But with Jessica, it's never enough. She always finds a way to make me the problem. Helen, you passed the salt without me asking for it. Her voice came out sharp, offended, as if I had committed an unforgivable crime. I had seen her reaching for the salt shaker and simply slid it closer to her. A normal gesture, a common courtesy anyone would do at a table. But for Jessica, it was the perfect excuse. Sorry, I was just trying to help, I said calmly. With that infinite patience I've developed over these 3 years of enduring her contempt. But she was already starting her performance. It's just that you always do that. You always intervene. You always butt in. I can't even have a peaceful dinner without you hovering over me, controlling me. Her voice rose. Her eyes filled with fake tears. Tears that sprang up in a second, as if she had them saved up, waiting for the perfect moment to use them. Ethan put his silverware down on his plate. The sound of metal on porcelain echoed in the silence. I saw him turn to me with an expression I had never seen before, pure hardness, as if I were a stranger who had just insulted his wife in his own home. Jessica, honey, what happened? His voice was soft when he spoke to her, protective, full of concern, the same tone he used with me when he was a boy and someone bothered him at school. But now, that tone was for her, and for me, there was only contempt. Your mother constantly disrespects me. I can't take it anymore, Ethan. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when she always makes me feel like I'm not good enough for you. Jessica brought her napkin to her eyes. She sobbed. She trembled. An award-winning performance. And my son was buying every bit of it. I was paralyzed in my chair, fork still in hand, watching the scene like I was in a horror movie where I was the main character. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself. But the words got stuck in my throat, because I knew nothing I said would matter. Ethan had already chosen his side. Mom, you need to leave. Ethan's voice was dry, sharp, as if he were firing an employee who had made a serious mistake. I don't want you here tonight. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I took my purse from the chair. My hands moved on their own, as if my body knew it had to get out of there before something worse happened. Ethan, I was just trying to help. I didn't mean to upset Jessica. My voice came out broken, small, as if I had shrunk into something insignificant, something that no longer deserved to be in that house full of luxury and appearances. But he was already comforting his wife, holding her, whispering things in her ear as she continued to cry against his chest. He didn't even look at me as I walked to the door. He didn't even lift his head to see his mother leave. Heartbroken, I reached the front door. I opened it. The cold night air hit my face. But before I could take a step outside, I heard his voice behind me. Firm, final, like a sentence with no appeal. Mom, this can't go on. Jessica is right. You're always interfering. You always make her feel uncomfortable. I need you to come next Saturday and apologize to her in front of all our guests. We're having a dinner party and you are going to apologize properly. Either that or don't bother coming back. I turned to look at him. There was my son. The boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us. The boy I fed with what little I had. The boy I dressed in second-hand clothes so he could go to a good school. The boy I worked double shifts for years. That boy was now a man who looked at me as if I were a problem he needed to solve. Apologize or get out of my house. Those words fell on me like stones. Heavy, cold, unmovable. Jessica appeared behind him. She wasn't crying anymore. She had a small smile on her lips, almost imperceptible. But I saw it. That smile of victory. That smile that said she had won, that she had put me in my place, that she had turned me into what she always wanted me to be, nothing. I nodded, not in submission, not because I accepted their version of events. I nodded because in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted me to apologize in front of their guests, I would, but not in the way they expected. Not with my head bowed and the trembling voice of a mother desperate to win back her son's love. No, I was going to go to that dinner. I was going to stand up in front of all their rich friends with their plastic faces, and I was going to say something none of them expected to hear. Something that would destroy the entire perfect facade Jessica and Ethan had built. Something that would make them regret ever treating me this way. All right, Ethan, I'll be there on Saturday. I'll apologize to Jessica, I promise. My voice came out calm, too calm. So calm that I saw a flicker of doubt in my son's eyes. But it was too late. I had already accepted. He had already sealed his own fate. I left that house with my back straight, without looking back, without crying, because the tears would come later, in the loneliness of my apartment, in the darkness of my room. But not there. Not in front of them. I wouldn't give them that pleasure. I walked down the empty street to the bus stop. The cold wind cut my face, but I barely felt it. My mind was already working, remembering, connecting the dots, gathering pieces of a puzzle I had been ignoring for far too long, because I knew things. Things Jessica thought no one else knew. Things I had seen, heard, kept silent about. The bus arrived. I sat in the back. I watched out the window as the city blurred past. The lights, the buildings, the people walking with their normal lives. And there I was, 67 years old, feeling like everything I had worked for was collapsing, but also feeling something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time, determination. Because that Saturday wasn't going to be the day Helen Marquez knelt before a manipulative woman and her son who was blinded by money. That Saturday was going to be the day the truth came out, the day everyone would see who Jessica Davenport really was, the day my son would discover that the price of humiliating your mother is higher than he ever imagined. I got to my apartment. I closed the door. I stood in the darkness of the entryway, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. A small, bitter smile, but a real one. Because now I had a purpose, now I had a plan, and nothing and no one was going to stop me. There was a time when Ethan and I were inseparable, a time when he would come to me to tell me everything, his joys, his fears, his dreams, a time when I was his favorite person in the whole world. I remember the day he was born, March 29th. It was raining so hard the streets looked like rivers. I was alone at the hospital. His father had left us 2 months earlier when he found out a baby was coming. He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he had other plans, that I would understand someday. I never understood, but I didn't need him either, because when they placed Ethan in my arms and I saw him open those dark eyes, I knew he was all I would ever need in this life. The first few years were hard. I worked in a laundromat during the day and cleaned offices at night. I slept 4 hours, sometimes less. But every time I came home and saw my son smiling at me from his crib, all the exhaustion disappeared. All the pain was worth it, because I was building something. I was giving my son a chance at a better life than mine. Ethan was a brilliant child. He learned to read before the other kids in his class. He always brought home good grades. The teachers told me he was special, that he had a promising future, and I believed it. I worked more hours. I saved every penny, all so he could go to a good college someday. When he was 8, Ethan won a math contest at his school. I remember him running home with the certificate in his hands. "Mom, Mom, I won! Look what I won!" His eyes were shining with excitement, with pride. I hugged him so tight that he laughed and told me I was squishing him, but I couldn't let go. I couldn't stop thinking that all the sacrifice was paying off. That night, we had his favorite meal. Spaghetti with tomato sauce. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But for us, it was a feast. We ate sitting on the living room floor because we didn't have a table yet. We laughed. We talked about his dreams. He wanted to be an engineer. He wanted to build huge bridges that connected cities. He wanted to do important things. And I told him he would, that I would do everything possible to make sure he did. And I did. I worked until my body begged for rest, and even then, I kept going. Every extra dollar went into a savings account for his education. Every weekend I could pick up an extra shift, I took it. It didn't matter how tired I was. It didn't matter how much my back ached or how much my hands burned from all the washing and cleaning. Ethan was my purpose. My reason to keep going. When he reached his teenage years, our bond grew even stronger. He told me about the girls he liked, about problems with his friends, about his insecurities. I was his confidant, his advisor, his safe harbor. Every night, before bed, he would come into my room, and we would talk for hours, about everything, about nothing, just enjoying each other's company. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know," he told me one night when he was 15. He had just found out that one of his classmates had both parents and lived in a big house with a yard. I think he felt bad about our situation, about our small apartment, about the clothes I wore, which were already years old. But I took his hand and told him we didn't need more, that the two of us were enough, that love isn't measured in square feet or new clothes. And he believed me. For many years, he believed me. We were a team, Helen and Ethan against the world. That's what we called ourselves. That's how we felt. Invincible, united, unbreakable. He managed to get into college on a scholarship. I cried with happiness the day the acceptance letter came. I cried so much that Ethan had to hug me and tell me it was okay, that we had done it, that his life was going to change. And it did. He studied civil engineering, just like he always dreamed. He graduated with honors. He got a job at a major firm. He earned good money, very good money, more money than we had ever seen in our entire lives. The first thing he did when he got his first paycheck was take me to a fancy restaurant. "Mom, this is for everything you did for me." He ordered wine. He ordered an appetizer. He ordered dessert. He spent almost $200 that night. I felt uncomfortable with so much luxury, but he was so happy, so proud to be able to treat me, so grateful. He took my hand across the table and told me he would never forget everything I had sacrificed for him. I'll never forget those words, because they were the last truly honest words he ever said to me. The last words before everything changed, before she appeared. During the first few years of his career, Ethan came to visit me every week. Sundays were ours. We ate together. We watched movies. We talked about his work, his projects, his future plans. He bought me a new refrigerator when the old one broke. He helped me pay the rent when I had a tough month. He was attentive, affectionate, present. "Mom, when I have my own house, you're going to live with me," he promised me more than once. "You'll never have to worry about anything ever again. I'm going to take care of you like you took care of me." And I believed him. Of course I believed him. He was my son, my boy, the man I had trusted my entire life. But then she arrived, Jessica Davenport. He met her at a business conference, a woman from a wealthy family, with contacts, with influence, with all the money we never had. Ethan introduced me to her 3 months after they started dating. He brought her to my apartment one Saturday afternoon. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special." His voice sounded excited, nervous, like when he was a kid and had something important to show me. I opened the door, and there she was, Jessica, with her brand-name clothes, her expensive shoes, her perfume that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked at me with a polite smile, but her eyes sized me up in a second. They measured me, they judged me, and they found me lacking. "A pleasure, Helen." She didn't say Mrs. Marquez. She just used my first name, as if we were friends the same age, as if she had the right to be so informal from the first moment. She walked into my apartment and looked around with that expression I now know so well, that expression that says everything without saying a word, that expression that screams, how small, how old, how poor. I made coffee. I served cookies I had bought especially for the visit. I tried to make conversation, but Jessica answered in monosyllables, with forced smiles, with glances at her watch, as if being in my home was a torture she had to endure just because Ethan had asked her to. And Ethan didn't notice, or didn't want to notice. He was so fascinated by her, so enchanted. He looked at her as if she were the most wonderful thing he had ever seen. And maybe to him, she was. Because Jessica represented everything he never had. The money, the status, the entry into a world he had once only watched from the outside. After that visit, everything changed, slowly at first. So slowly I almost didn't notice. Ethan started canceling our Sundays. I have dinner with Jessica's parents. I have a work event. I have to go with Jessica to some function. There was always a reason. There was always something more important than spending time with me. The calls became less frequent, the visits more spaced out. And when he did come, he wasn't the same. He talked differently. He dressed differently. Even the way he looked at me had changed, as if he were suddenly ashamed of where he came from, as if I were an uncomfortable reminder of a life he wanted to forget. But I kept waiting. I kept believing it was just a phase, that when the novelty of the relationship wore off, my son would come back, that he would remember who was there when he had nothing, that he would remember who sacrificed everything so he could get where he was. How wrong I was. Jessica entered my son's life like a quiet storm. At first, everything seemed normal, even nice. Ethan was in love, and I wanted to see him happy. That's what a mother does. You put your son's happiness above your own doubts, above that inner voice telling you something isn't right. The first few months after meeting her were confusing. Ethan still visited, but it wasn't the same. He'd arrive in a hurry. He'd leave early. He always had his phone in his hand, always waiting for a text from her. And when that text arrived, his face would light up in a way that hurt me, because that light wasn't for me anymore. It wasn't because he was with me. It was for her. One Sunday, he arrived with news. Mom, Jessica, and I are getting married. He said it with a huge smile, with that childlike excitement he always had when something good happened to him. I should have jumped for joy. I should have hugged him. I should have told him I was happy for him, but something in my chest tightened. Something told me this wasn't going to end well. Still, I smiled. Still, I hugged him. Still, I said all the words a son expects to hear from his mother at a moment like that, because that's what we mothers do. We swallow our fears, we hide our doubts, and we offer support even if inside we're dying of worry. The wedding was elegant, too elegant. They got married in a ballroom that cost over $30,000 just for one night. There were flowers everywhere, imported roses, orchids, arrangements so large they looked like sculptures. The food was from a renowned chef. The cake had 5 tiers. Everything was perfect. Everything was excessive. Everything was from Jessica's world. I felt out of place from the moment I walked in. My dress was simple, pretty but simple. I had bought it at a discount store because I couldn't spend $500 on a dress like the other guests. I did my own hair. My shoes were already 2 years old. And as I walked among all those elegant people, I felt every stare, every silent judgment, every thought that said she doesn't belong here. Jessica's family greeted me with cold courtesy. Her mother shook my hand as if she were touching something dirty. Her father didn't even look me in the eye. Her siblings ignored me after the obligatory hello. I was the mother of the groom, but to them, I was invisible. Worse than invisible. I was an uncomfortable reminder that Ethan came from nothing, that he hadn't always had money or an important last name. During the ceremony, I sat in the front row, alone, because I had no one else. My family is small. My friends couldn't afford to come to a wedding like that. So there I was, watching my son marry a woman I barely knew, watching him look at her as if she were his entire universe, and feeling like I was becoming nothing. At the reception, they sat me at a table in the back, far from the head table where the bride and groom were, far from Jessica's family, who occupied the best tables. I shared a table with people who also didn't know anyone, distant cousins of someone, friends of friends, all just as lost as I was in that sea of luxury and appearances. Ethan came to greet me during the dancing. "Mom, you look beautiful." He lied. I knew it wasn't true, but I appreciated the lie because at least it meant he still cared about my feelings. We danced one song. He led me to the floor, and I tried not to cry. I tried not to think that this was the beginning of the end, that after today, My son wouldn't be just mine anymore. He wouldn't need me like he used to. Thank you for everything, Mom. For giving me the life you gave me. For preparing me for this moment. He whispered in my ear as we danced. And I nodded because I couldn't speak. Because if I opened my mouth, I would sob. I would beg him not to forget me. Not to let her change him. To remember where he came from. But I said nothing. I just danced with my son. I just enjoyed those 3 minutes that would probably be the last time he saw me as someone important in his life. After the wedding, everything accelerated. Ethan and Jessica moved into a house that she bought. A huge house in an upscale suburban neighborhood where every property was worth over $500,000. I went to visit them a week after they got back from their honeymoon. I brought a gift. A simple but nice set of dishes. It was what I could afford, what my budget allowed. Jessica opened the gift in front of me. She looked at the plates, turned them over to see the brand, and then she smiled. That smile I was starting to know. That smile that doesn't reach the eyes. How lovely, Helen. Thank you. Although we already have a dinner service, but we can use this for when we eat something informal. Something simple. She left the box on the table as if it were trash to be thrown out later. Ethan said nothing. He didn't defend my gift. He didn't tell his wife to be kinder. He just looked away, uncomfortable, ashamed. And I understood in that moment that I couldn't count on him anymore. That she already had more power over him than I did. The following months were a process of slow disappearance. Every time I called, Ethan was busy. Every time I suggested visiting, there was a commitment, a dinner, a trip, a meeting. Always something that was more important than seeing his mother. And when they finally did invite me, Jessica was there, controlling the conversation, interrupting when I spoke, correcting things I said. Ethan, your mom said you put the tomato in first, but really, it goes in last. Small corrections, small humiliations, designed to make me feel stupid, to make me feel like I knew nothing, that she knew more, that she was better. And the worst part is that Ethan let it happen. He would laugh, he would nod, he would agree with her, his mother who raised him, his mother who sacrificed everything for him, his mother who worked until she broke so he could get an education. That mother was now less important than his rich wife's opinion. One day, I visited without calling first. It was a mistake. I knew it the moment Jessica opened the door, and I saw her face. Pure annoyance. Disgust, almost. Helen, we weren't expecting you. She didn't say come in. She didn't say what a surprise. She just left me standing there at the door as if I were a persistent salesperson who had knocked at a bad time. I just wanted to see Ethan. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. My voice came out small, pleading. I hated how I sounded. I hated that I had become someone who had to beg to see her own son. He's working. He has an important meeting on a video call. He can't be interrupted. Jessica was already closing the door. I put my foot out to stop it. A desperate gesture. A pathetic gesture. But I needed to see my son. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to feel that I still mattered to someone. Just a moment, please, I said, almost begging. And she sighed. That long sigh that says you're such a nuisance. That sigh that makes you feel like you're a burden, a problem, something to be tolerated. Wait here. She didn't let me in. She made me stay on the porch as if I were a stranger. As if after carrying Ethan in my womb for 9 months, after raising him alone for 25 years, I didn't have the right to enter his house. I waited for 15 minutes. Standing there, feeling the neighbors pass by and look at me. An old woman standing on a fancy porch as if she were begging. That's what I must have looked like. That's what they made me feel like. Finally, Ethan came out. He had his phone in his hand. His face was tense. Mom, you can't just show up like this without calling. I'm working. He didn't even hug me. He didn't even smile. He just scolded me as if I were a child who had done something wrong. I just wanted to see you, honey. We haven't talked in so long. I tried to touch his arm, but he moved away. A small movement, almost imperceptible, but I felt it like a slap. I'll call you later, Mom. I can't talk right now. And he closed the door. Without a kiss. Without a hug. Without anything. He just closed the door and left me there, standing, feeling like I had just lost my son forever. I walked to the bus stop with tears in my eyes. I cried the whole way home. I cried on the bus full of people pretending not to see me. I cried in my empty apartment. I cried until I had no tears left. And then I realized something. Jessica hadn't just married my son. She had conquered him. She had changed him. She had turned him into someone I no longer recognized. Someone capable of closing the door in his own mother's face. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Worse even than when Ethan's father abandoned us. Worse than the nights working without sleep. Worse than the years of poverty and sacrifice. Because this time, the pain was coming from my own son. And that pain has no equal. I tried to talk to him. I tried to make him see what was happening. I would call, and he was always in a hurry. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Mom, I'm heading out to dinner. Mom, Jessica is waiting for me." Always an excuse. Always something more important than listening to his mother. One afternoon, I finally got him to come to my apartment. I told him I needed to talk to him about something important. He came, but he had that annoyed look on his face. That expression that says, "I have better things to do, but I came because it's my obligation." He sat on the edge of the sofa. He didn't even take off his jacket, ready to leave at any moment. "Ethan, I feel like I'm losing you." I was direct. No beating around the bush. Because I didn't have time to be careful anymore. "I barely see you. We barely talk. And when we are together, I feel like you're not really with me. That your head is somewhere else." With her? His face changed. It became hard, defensive. "Mom, don't start. Jessica has nothing to do with this." His voice was irritated, as if I had said something offensive, as if mentioning his wife were a crime. "I didn't say she's to blame. I'm just saying that since you got married, everything changed. You changed." I tried to stay calm. I tried not to sound accusatory. But it was hard, because every word I said was true, and he knew it. "I grew up, Mom. That's what happens. People grow up, people change. I can't keep being your little boy my whole life. I have a wife now. I have responsibilities. I have a life." His words were like blows, each one designed to hurt me, to make me feel like I was the problem, that I was the one who didn't understand. "I'm not asking you to be my little boy. I'm just asking you to include me in your life, to not treat me like I'm a stranger, like I'm not the person who gave everything for you." My voice broke. I hated showing him weakness, but I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. "You're so dramatic, always exaggerating everything. Jessica is right. You're too intense, too demanding." He stood up. He was already leaving. He had already decided this conversation was over, and I couldn't do anything to stop him. "Jessica said that about me?" It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation that she spoke ill of me, that she was filling him with poison against his own mother, and he was letting her. Worse, he believed her. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at me with those eyes I no longer recognized. Those eyes where there once was love, and now there was only discomfort, annoyance. "I need to go, Mom. Jessica is waiting for me to go to dinner with her parents." And he left, leaving me there with a broken heart and 1,000 unanswered questions. After that conversation, I stopped insisting. I stopped calling him so much. I stopped suggesting plans. Because every rejection hurt more than the last. Every excuse was like a door slamming shut. And I was tired of banging my head against closed doors. But the silence was worse. Not hearing from him. Not hearing his voice. Watching weeks go by without a call, without a text, without anything. It was like watching him die slowly, like losing him bit by bit, and not being able to do anything to stop it. One night I dared to send him a text. Simple, direct. "Ethan, I miss you. Can we see each other?" I sent it and stared at the phone, waiting for his reply. An hour passed. 2 hours. 3 hours. Nothing. He left me on red. He didn't reply. My own son ignored me as if I didn't exist. 2 days later, he finally responded. "Sorry, Mom. I've been busy. Maybe we can get together next month." Next month. as if I were a dentist appointment that could be rescheduled, as if seeing me were an annoying obligation that had to be fulfilled eventually, but with no hurry. I tried to fill my time with other things. I started going to church more often. I made friends with Margaret, a woman my age who was also alone. She understood. She also had children who had drifted away, who visited her once a year if she was lucky. We would meet for coffee, talk about our lives, our sorrows. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. But nothing filled the void Ethan had left. Nothing healed the pain of knowing that the son I gave everything for now treated me like I was an obstacle in his perfect life. The months passed, and the visits became even rarer. When they finally invited me to their house, everything was awkward. Jessica treated me with that fake kindness that is worse than direct mistreatment. She'd offer me coffee in expensive cups. She'd ask how I was in a sweet voice but with empty eyes. And I played the game. I smiled. I said everything was fine. I pretended not to notice her digs, her poisoned comments disguised as concern. "Helen, you look tired. Are you sleeping well? You should take better care of yourself at your age," she'd say while pouring me tea in fine china. As if she cared, as if she were really worried about my well-being, but I saw the truth in her eyes. She just wanted me to look bad, to feel bad, to know that I didn't belong in her world. And Ethan sat right there, silent, letting it happen. Sometimes he even agreed when she said something particularly hurtful, like when she mentioned, I should update my wardrobe because the clothes I wore were so outdated. He laughed. My own son laughed at his mother's clothes, the same mother who wore old clothes for years so he could have a new uniform for school. Jessica started comparing us. Subtly at first. My mother traveled to Europe last month. It was wonderful. Have you traveled, Helen? She knew perfectly well I had never left the country, that I barely had money to pay my rent. But she needed to rub it in. She needed me to know that she came from a better world, that her family was superior, that I was less. One day, I arrived at their house and found they had changed all the photographs. Before, there were some pictures of Ethan as a child, pictures I had given them, pictures of the two of us, of our life together. But now, there were only pictures of the two of them, of their wedding, of their trips, of their perfect life where I didn't exist. They had erased my history with my son. They had erased our past, as if those years had never existed. Where are the pictures that were here? I asked, trying to sound casual, trying not to show that I was dying inside. Oh, those. We put them in storage. Jessica redecorated. Everything is more modern now, more elegant. Ethan didn't even look at me when he said it. He was checking his phone, as if this were an unimportant conversation, as if he hadn't just told me he had stored away all the proof that I was ever important in his life. Every visit was a new humiliation. Every encounter, a new way to make me feel small, insignificant, invisible. And the worst part is that Ethan didn't just allow it. He participated. He had become his wife's accomplice in the task of destroying his mother. The invitations became even more spaced out, and when they did come, they always came with conditions. Come for dinner, Mom, but not too late. We have plans after. Come on Sunday, but only for 2 hours because we're going out. Come, but don't bring food. Jessica already cooked. Come, but don't talk about certain topics. They make Jessica uncomfortable. Come, but basically, don't be you. Don't exist. Just show up and disappear without a trace. I tried to talk to Ethan one more time, over the phone, because he wouldn't even see me in person anymore. Ethan, I know Jessica doesn't want me around. And I understand she's your wife, and she's your priority now. But I am your mother. That doesn't change. That should never change. Mom, enough already. You're obsessed. Jessica has nothing against you. You're the one who's always looking for trouble, the one who's always making drama. His voice sounded tired, fed up, as if I were a capricious child who couldn't understand reason, as if this were all a product of my imagination, of my need to create conflict where there was none. I'm not looking for trouble. I just want you to treat me like your mother, to include me in your life, to not make me feel like I'm a nuisance. The tears started to fall. My voice trembled. I didn't care about sounding desperate anymore. I was desperate. I can't keep having this conversation. It's always the same with you. Always the victim, always suffering. You need to grow up, Mom. You need to understand that you're not the center of my world anymore. And he hung up. My son hung up the phone on me while I was crying, while I was begging him for a little love, for a little consideration. I sat there in my living room, with the phone in my hand, feeling like I had just lost the final battle, that there was nothing more to be done, that my son was gone, that the boy I raised with so much love had become a stranger, someone capable of hurting me without remorse, without guilt, without anything. The truth came to me in the most unexpected way. A Tuesday afternoon. I had gone to the bank to deposit my Social Security check when I saw Jessica coming out of a fancy downtown coffee shop. She wasn't alone. She was with a man, young, well-dressed. And the way they were talking wasn't the way you talk to a friend. It was intimate, complicit, suspicious. I hid behind a lamppost. I didn't want her to see me. I didn't want to have to greet her and pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't stop watching either. There was something about that scene that unsettled me, something that told me I needed to pay attention. The man handed her a folder. Jessica opened it. She reviewed some papers. She nodded, and then she took an envelope from her purse and gave it to him. It was fast, discreet. But I saw it. I saw the exchange. I saw how she looked around before doing it, as if she didn't want anyone to see her, and then I knew something was wrong. That whatever was happening there wasn't legal, or at least, it wasn't honest. I stood there for several minutes after they both left, trying to process what I had seen, trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe he was a lawyer. Maybe they were work papers. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there because I was already biased against her. But something deep inside told me no, that this was important, that I had to investigate, that I had finally found a clue to who Jessica Davenport really was. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept turning over what I had seen. The envelope, the folder, the nervous way Jessica looked around. And then I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out what she was hiding. I was going to find the truth, even if it hurt me, even if it destroyed what little was left of my relationship with Ethan. I called Margaret the next day. Margaret, I need your help. I told her what I had seen. She listened in silence. And when I finished, she sighed. Helen, be careful. Getting involved in this could be dangerous. But I had already decided. There was no turning back. Margaret had a nephew who worked as a private investigator. Nothing big. Small cases, infidelities, minor fraud. But he knew how to get information, how to follow leads, how to find what others wanted to hide. I asked Margaret to put me in touch with him. Mark Jennings, that was his name. A man in his 40s, serious, professional. We met at a coffee shop far from Ethan's neighborhood. I didn't want to risk anyone seeing us. I told him everything, about the man, the folder, the envelope, and I also told him about how Jessica had entered my son's life, how she had pushed me away, how everything had changed since she appeared. Mrs. Marquez, I understand your situation, but I need you to understand that this could take time, and it could cost money. Investigating isn't cheap. Mark was honest from the start. He told me he would need at least $1,000 to start, to follow her, to check public records, to see if there was anything shady in her past. $1,000 was almost everything I had saved. It was my emergency fund, the money I kept in case I got sick, in case I had to move, in case something serious happened. But in that moment, I knew there was nothing more serious than losing my son without a fight. That if I didn't do this, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I gave him the money. All of it. And Mark began his work. He told me he would call me in 2 weeks, that I shouldn't try to contact Jessica or Ethan in the meantime, that I should act normal, that I shouldn't raise any suspicions. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. Every day I woke up wondering if I had done the right thing, if this wouldn't just make me the villain of the story, the meddling mother-in-law who couldn't let her son live his life. But then I would remember Ethan's face, how he had changed, how he treated me, And I knew that some outside force was influencing him, that my son hadn't become like this on his own, that someone was behind it. And that someone was Jessica. Mark's call came on a Thursday afternoon. "Mrs. Marquez, we need to talk. I found something." His voice sounded serious, worried even. We arranged to meet that same night at the same coffee shop. When I arrived, Mark was already there. He had a folder on the table, thicker than I expected. It looked full of papers, documents, proof. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. "Mrs. Marquez, what I found is serious. Very serious," he began, without wasting time. "Jessica Davenport has been manipulating your son from the beginning, and not just emotionally, financially, too." He opened the folder and started showing me documents, contracts, bank statements, printed conversations. Jessica convinced Ethan to put all his savings into investments she supposedly managed. She promised to double his money in a year. He trusted her. He gave her everything. Over $120,000 he had saved from years of work. Mark pointed to the papers as he spoke. The numbers, the accounts, all right there, black and white. "And what happened to that money?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. I already knew nothing good could come of this. It disappeared. Or rather, she moved it to accounts in her name. To real investments, but ones where she is the sole beneficiary. Ethan put up the money, but she is the only owner. If they get divorced tomorrow, he doesn't see a cent of it back. Mark turned to another document. This is the contract he signed. It's written in a way that makes it look like they're partners. But if you read the fine print, everything is in her name. I felt the floor move beneath me. My son had been scammed. By the woman who claimed to love him. By the woman he married. And worse, he had no idea. He trusted her blindly. He had given her everything, and she had taken it without remorse. "There's more," Mark continued. "I found texts between Jessica and her mother from before the wedding, talking about how Ethan was the perfect candidate. Young, good salary, no family to interfere much. Those were her words. No family to interfere. And then there are more recent messages where she talks about you, Mrs. Marquez." "What do they say?" My voice came out as a whisper. I was trembling. My whole body was trembling. Mark showed me the screenshots, WhatsApp conversations between Jessica and her mother, between Jessica and her friends, all talking about me, about the old lady, about the mother-in-law who doesn't know her place, about how she needed to get Ethan away from me because I was an obstacle to her plans. "I've almost got him where I want him. I just need him to finish cutting ties with the mother. He's too dependent on her. But I'm working on it. Little by little, I'm convincing him she's toxic, that she manipulates him, that he needs to get away to be happy." That message was from 6 months ago. 6 months in which Jessica had systematically poisoned my son against me. Another message read, "The old lady showed up today without calling. I had to make up that Ethan was busy. She can't keep just appearing like that. I need him to set clearer boundaries. Maybe if I stage a situation where she looks bad in front of everyone, he'll finally understand he has to choose. Either her or me. And obviously, he'll choose me." Tears streamed down my face, unchecked. I read message after message, seeing how this woman had planned every step, every humiliation, every moment of pain. It had all been calculated. It had all been part of a plan to destroy my relationship with my son and take his money. I also found this. Mark pulled out more papers. Jessica has debts. A lot of debts. Her family isn't as rich as they seem. Her father has been bankrupt for 3 years. He lost his business. The house they live in is mortgaged to the hilt. All the money they have is borrowed. It's all appearances, pure smoke. And Jessica needed to marry someone who could maintain that lifestyle. Someone who had money, or who could get it. And she found Ethan. He showed me bank statements from the Davenport family. Debts to banks, to lenders, to credit card companies. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And all the while, they kept up appearances. Kept living in their big house. Kept buying expensive clothes. Kept traveling. All with money they didn't have. all with loans they couldn't pay. And now Jessica was doing the same with my son's money, spending it, investing it in her name, making sure that when everything collapsed, she would be protected and Ethan would be left with nothing. Does Ethan know any of this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mark shook his head. He has no idea. She shows him fake account statements, tells him the investments are doing well, that they're making money. But the truth is, every month she takes money out of those accounts to pay her family's debts, to maintain the illusion of wealth, and Ethan works harder and harder, thinking he's building a future, not knowing that future is being stolen every single day. I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe. I tried to process everything I had just discovered. My son was being manipulated, scammed, deliberately alienated from me, and all for money. For damn money and appearances. What do I do with this, Mark? How do I tell my son that the woman he loves is a liar? How do I show him this without him thinking I'm making it up because I don't like his wife? That's the problem, Mrs. Marquez. Jessica has done a perfect job. She has planted in Ethan's mind that you are the problem, that you're controlling, jealous, manipulative. So if you show up with this proof, there's a good chance he won't believe you, that he'll think you paid to fabricate evidence, that you're so desperate to separate them that you're capable of lying. I spent days staring at those documents. I read them over and over as if they might change, as if I'd discover it was all a mistake, that Mark had been wrong, that Jessica wasn't really a manipulator who had planned everything from the beginning. But no, the papers kept saying the same thing. The truth remained the same, raw, painful, undeniable. I put everything in a shoebox at the back of my closet. I couldn't leave them out. Every time I saw them, my stomach hurt. It made me want to call Ethan and scream the truth at him, to go to his house and shove the documents in his face, to force him to see what I saw. But I knew I couldn't do it that way. Jessica had done her work too well. She had turned me into the enemy, the toxic mother who couldn't be trusted. Margaret came to visit me often during those days. She brought me food because I had no desire to cook. She sat with me in silence when I didn't want to talk. And when I finally did speak, she just listened. She didn't judge. She didn't tell me what to do. She was just there. And that was more than my own son was doing for me. You have to be smart, Helen. You have to think carefully about how to use this, because you're only going to get one chance. If you do it wrong, Ethan will never believe you, and you'll lose him for good. Margaret's words echoed in my head all the time. She was right. I couldn't mess this up. I couldn't let my emotions control me. I had to be cold, calculating. Like Jessica, I started to watch, to pay attention to every detail. Every time Ethan mentioned something about his life, I wrote it down. Dates, names, places, financial decisions Jessica had suggested, trips they had taken, big purchases, everything. I was building a map, a timeline that showed the pattern, the systematic way Jessica had taken control. I also started saving every text Ethan sent me, every conversation where he repeated things that Jessica had clearly told him. Mom, you need to understand you can't just come over whenever you want. Mom, she feels uncomfortable when you criticize her decisions. Mom, you have to respect that I have my own family now. Words that didn't sound like my son. Words that had Jessica's venom hidden behind them. Mark called me 2 weeks later. I have more information. Jessica is planning something. We arranged to meet again. This time in a park, more discreet. Less chance of anyone seeing us together. Jessica is going to ask Ethan to buy a new house. Bigger, more expensive. She already found one. It's worth $800,000. She's going to tell him it's an investment, that the value will go up, that it's the perfect time. Mark showed me an email she had sent to a real estate agent, dated 2 days prior. My husband has good credit and excellent income. We are ready to make an offer. Ethan doesn't have $800,000. I barely had enough to buy the one I live in now, I said, confused, not understanding how Jessica planned to do this. I know, but she's going to convince him to take out a massive loan, to use all the credit he has. And when they get that house, she's going to have it put in both their names, but with a special clause. If they divorce, the house goes to her, because she's going to argue that her family put down the down payment, which is a lie. But she'll forge documents to prove it. Mark knew things that scared me, things that made me wonder just how deep Jessica's plan went. That's fraud. That's illegal. My voice trembled. Not with fear, with rage, with helplessness. Watching this woman destroy my son, and I couldn't do anything to stop her. It is. But it's very hard to prove if Ethan signs voluntarily, if he agrees to everything without reading, without questioning, which is exactly what Jessica has been training him to do for 3 years. Trust her blindly. Don't doubt. Don't ask for second opinions. Just sign where she tells him. Mark put the papers away. Mrs. Marquez, if you're going to do something, it has to be soon, before he signs for that house. Because if he does, he will be financially tied to Jessica for decades, and getting out of that will be almost impossible. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with the box of documents in my lap, thinking, planning, trying to find the perfect way to reveal the truth. It had to be in public. It had to be in front of witnesses. It had to be at a moment when Jessica couldn't escape, where she couldn't twist the story, where she couldn't play the victim. And then I remembered the dinner party, the one where I was supposed to apologize, where Ethan had invited his rich friends, Jessica's associates, the people who mattered in their new world of appearances. That was my chance. That was the perfect moment. I called Mark. I need you to come to that dinner. I need you to be a witness, and I need you to bring everything. Every document, every piece of proof, every text, everything. I explained my plan. He listened in silence. When I finished, there was a long pause. Mrs. Marquez, this is going to be brutal. It's going to destroy Jessica. But it's also going to destroy the image Ethan has of his life, of his marriage, of everything. Are you sure you want to do this? His voice sounded worried, as if he were warning me of the consequences, as if there were no going back after this. I'm sure. My son deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know that the woman he married is using him, is stealing from him, and is deliberately pushing his mother away. If after knowing all this, he still decides to stay with her, at least it will be his decision, an informed decision, not one based on lies. My voice came out firm, firmer than I had felt in months. All right, I'll be there. Mark agreed. And then I knew there was no turning back. That at that dinner, everything was going to change. For better or for worse. But it was going to change. And I was going to be the one to start it. I spent the days leading up to the dinner preparing, rehearsing in my head what I was going to say, how I was going to say it. I had to be perfect. I had to be clear, direct, with no emotions to betray me, no tears to make me look weak, no rage to make me look like the bitter mother-in-law. Just facts, just truth, just justice. I tried on 3 different dresses. I wanted to look dignified, respectable. I didn't want anyone to be able to say I was the poor mother, envious of her son's life. I chose a gray dress, simple but elegant. I fixed my hair. I put on a little makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman. A woman who was no longer going to beg. A woman who was no longer going to humiliate herself. A woman who was going to fight. Margaret came to see me the night before the dinner. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm ready. For the first time in a long time, I'm ready." She hugged me, so tight I could barely breathe. "Be careful, Helen. Whatever happens tomorrow, be careful. And don't have any regrets. Whatever you do, don't regret it." I'm not going to regret it. I've spent too much time regretting not acting sooner, regretting letting Jessica do whatever she wanted, regretting accepting the crumbs of attention Ethan gave me. Not anymore. Tomorrow, it all ends. Either I get my son back or I lose him for good. But at least I'm going down fighting. Ethan's call came on Wednesday morning. "Mom, Jessica and I are having a dinner party on Saturday. We want you to come." His voice sounded strangely formal, like he was reading a script, like someone had told him exactly what to say. "Of course, honey. What time do you want me to be there?" I kept my voice calm, sweet, the voice of the obedient mother they expected, the mother who was coming to apologize, the mother who had finally learned her place. At 8. And Mom, I need you to know there will be guests. Our friends. Important people. Jessica wants everything to be perfect. He paused, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to protest, to say I didn't want to apologize in front of strangers, but I said nothing. I just waited for him to continue. And we need you to apologize to Jessica. In front of everyone. For how you've treated her. For making her feel uncomfortable. For not respecting our space. She deserves that apology, Mom. And I deserve it too. There it was. The confirmation. The exact plan. Humiliate me in front of his social circle. Put me in my place. Show who held the power in that family. All right, Ethan. I'll be there. And I will talk to Jessica in front of everyone. I promise. I wasn't lying. I was going to talk to Jessica in front of everyone. It just wasn't going to be the conversation they expected. It wasn't going to be the humiliating apology they had planned. It was going to be something completely different. Thanks, Mom. I know this is hard for you, but it's necessary. We need to move forward as a family, and that can only happen if you accept your mistake. His voice sounded relieved, satisfied. He thought he had won, that he had finally broken me, that I had accepted my defeat. He hung up, and I stared at the phone, feeling that strange mix of sadness and determination. Sadness, because my son truly believed I was the problem. Determination, because in 3 days, I was going to show him who the problem had been all along. I called Mark immediately. It's Saturday, at 8. I need you to arrive at 8:30. When everyone is already there, when they can't cancel or escape. I gave him the address. I repeated the plan. He confirmed he would be there. With everything. With every piece of proof. Every document. Every text. The next few days were strange. I was calm. Too calm. Margaret told me I seemed like a different person. That I had a peace about me that was scary. And she was right. Because I had already made the decision. I already knew what I was going to do. There were no more doubts. There was no more fear. Just clarity. Just purpose. Saturday arrived. I woke up early, even though the dinner was at night. I showered. I got ready calmly. I put on the gray dress. I did my makeup. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I recognized myself. I wasn't the broken woman I had been. I wasn't the pleading mother begging for attention. I was Helen Marquez, the woman who raised a son on her own, the woman who worked to exhaustion, the woman who deserved respect, and who was about to demand it. I took a taxi to Ethan's house. I arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. I rang the doorbell. My heart was pounding, but my hands weren't shaking. I was ready, more ready than I had ever been for anything in my life. Jessica opened the door. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost $1,000. Sparkling jewelry, perfect makeup, fake smile. Helen, so glad you could make it. Her voice dripped with poisonous sweetness. The sweetness she uses when there are witnesses, when she has to pretend to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I walked in. The house was full of people. Elegant couples, well-dressed, with wine glasses in their hands, chatting in small groups. The smell of expensive food filled the air. Everything was perfect. Everything was designed to impress, to show success, to scream, "Look at everything we have." Ethan walked over. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Mom, thanks for coming. Come, I want to introduce you to some friends." He led me from group to group, introducing me as his mother, but without pride, without affection, just as a social obligation. "This is my mom. This is Helen." Empty words, meaningless, loveless. I smiled. I said hello. I accepted the glasses of wine they offered me, even though I don't drink. I just held them, just played the part that was expected of me. The grateful mother, happy to be included. The mother who was going to apologize. The mother who had finally learned. At 8:20, Jessica tapped her glass with a knife. The sound got everyone's attention. The conversation stopped. All faces turned to her. She smiled. That smile of triumph, that smile that said, "Now comes the good part. Now comes the public humiliation." Friends, thank you for being here tonight. Ethan and I wanted to share this special dinner with you, and we also wanted you to be witnesses to something important. She looked at me. Her eyes glittered with barely contained malice. Helen, Ethan's mother, has something she wants to say to us. Something she needs to say in front of all of you. Everyone looked at me, expectant, curious, some with pity, others with discomfort. No one knew exactly what to expect, but everyone knew it was going to be awkward. I stood up. I set my glass on the table. I walked to the center of the living room, right in front of Jessica and Ethan. "You're right, Jessica. I do have something to say, and I need everyone to hear it." My voice came out clear, firm, unwavering. I looked at my son. I looked at the woman who had destroyed our relationship. And then I smiled. A small, calm smile. The smile of someone who knows they're holding all the winning cards. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Mark had arrived. Exactly on time, just as we had planned. Jessica frowned. She wasn't expecting any more guests. Ethan, confused, went to open the door. When he saw Mark with his briefcase, his face showed surprise. "This is Mark Jennings. He's with me. He's part of what I need to tell you," I said, before Ethan could ask. Mark walked in. He nodded a short greeting. He stood beside me, like an ally, like a witness, like living proof that what I was about to say wasn't a product of my imagination or my desperation. It was real. It was verifiable. It was undeniable. "Jessica, you asked me to apologize to you, to admit that I've been a bad mother-in-law, that I've interfered, that I've made you feel uncomfortable." I paused. I let the silence stretch. I let everyone pay attention. "And you're right, I should apologize. But not for what you think." Her face changed. The smile vanished. In her eyes, something new appeared. Worry, fear, maybe. As if she suddenly realized this was not going according to her plan, that I was not the submissive mother she expected, that something had changed. "I must apologize for taking so long to find out who you really are, for letting you manipulate my son for 3 years, for not acting sooner. But that ends today. Today, everyone is going to know the truth about you, Jessica Davenport, about your family, about your intentions, about everything you've been hiding behind that fake smile and that borrowed luxury." The silence in the room was absolute. No one breathed. No one moved. Everyone stared. Ethan took a step toward me. "Mom, what are you doing?" His voice sounded alarmed, angry, but also confused, as if he didn't know whether to stop me or listen. "I'm saving my son. That's what I'm doing." I looked at Mark. He opened his briefcase. He took out the first folder, the first piece of proof, the first of many documents that were about to destroy the perfect world Jessica had built on lies. And we began. Mark placed the first folder on the dining room table. All the guests gathered around, curious, uncomfortable, unable to look away from what was about to be revealed. Jessica stood still, too still, like an animal that knows it's trapped but is still looking for an escape. "Ethan, your wife convinced you 2 years ago to invest all your savings in a fund she supposedly managed. $120,000. Your money. The money you earned with your work," I began. My voice was steady, every word measured, every sentence a direct blow to the heart of the lie. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Ethan tried to interrupt. His face was a mask of confusion, annoyance, but also a flicker of fear, as if a part of him already knew he wasn't going to like what came next. "Let me finish. Mark, show them the documents." Mark opened the folder. He took out the contracts, the bank statements, the papers that showed every movement of that money. "Here is the contract you signed, Ethan. It says that you and Jessica are partners, that you both own the investment. But if you read this clause right here, in the fine print, you'll see that in the event of a marital dissolution, all assets go to her. Only her." Ethan took the papers. His hands were shaking. He read. He reread. His face changed with every line, from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to understanding, from understanding to horror. Jessica, is this true? Why is this clause here? His voice sounded broken, as if every word pained him. Honey, it's just a legal technicality. My lawyer said it was necessary to protect the investment. Jessica tried to sound calm, but her voice was trembling. Her hands moved nervously. She reached out to touch Ethan, but he pulled away. A small but definitive movement. Protect the investment. Or protect yourself, I continued. Because that money was never in any real investment, Ethan. Look at these bank statements. Mark showed more papers. Your money was transferred to Jessica's personal accounts, and from there, it was used to pay debts. Her family's debts. The guests were murmuring now. Glances were exchanged. Some took out their phones, probably recording, or taking pictures. The scandal was unfolding in front of them. And everyone wanted their piece of the gossip to tell later. That's a lie. That's completely false. Jessica raised her voice. Her face had turned red. She was no longer the elegant hostess. She was a cornered, desperate woman. Ethan, she's making all this up. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of what we have. Jealous. I repeated the word with bitterness. Yes, Jessica, I'm jealous. Jealous of how you stole my son, of how you manipulated him, of how you systematically pushed me away. Mark, show them the messages. Mark took out more papers. Screenshots of conversations. Conversations between Jessica and her mother, between Jessica and her friends. Conversations where she planned every step, where she talked about me as an obstacle, where she mocked Ethan for trusting her, where she calculated how much money she could get out of him before he noticed. Ethan read the messages in silence. The color drained from his face with every line. I've almost got him where I want him. The old lady is a problem, but I'm pushing him away from her, bit by bit. It's easier than I thought. I just have to cry a little, and he does whatever I want. Those were Jessica's words. Her own words. Impossible to deny. Jessica, you wrote this? Ethan held up the phone. His voice was barely a whisper full of pain, of betrayal, of a world collapsing. Did you really write this about me? About my mother? Jessica didn't answer. She just stared at the papers, looking for an escape, looking for an explanation, but there was none. The proof was irrefutable. The messages were clear. It was all there, black and white, undeniable truth. And there's more, I continued, mercilessly. Jessica told everyone her family is rich, that they have properties, successful businesses. But the truth is, they're bankrupt. Her father lost everything 3 years ago. The house they live in is mortgaged. They have debts with 4 different banks, over $500,000 in debt. And your money, Ethan? Your money has been paying those debts, maintaining the illusion of wealth, propping up a lie. Mark showed the bank documents from the Davenport family. Overdue mortgages, unpaid loans, maxed out credit cards. All the money they pretended to have was smoke, debt disguised as success. And now everyone in that room knew it. All the elegant friends, all the business partners, everyone who had believed the facade. One of the guests, Amanda Hayes, a businesswoman who knew Jessica from some social club, spoke up. So, the trips to Europe, the jewelry, that was all with Ethan's money? Her voice was indignant, deceived. Because she had probably also believed that Jessica was on her same social level, that she belonged in that circle of wealth. And now she was discovering it was all a lie. Jessica tried one last time. Ethan, please let me explain. Yes, I made mistakes, but I did it for us, for our future. Your mother is twisting everything. She's making it look worse than it is. Her eyes filled with tears. Real tears this time. Not of manipulation, of desperation, of watching everything fall apart. But Ethan wasn't looking at her with love anymore. He was looking at her with disgust, with betrayal, with the pain of someone who discovers that everything they believed was a lie. You used me. From the very beginning, you used me. You pushed me away from my mother. You made me believe she was the problem, when the problem was you. His voice rose, rage mixed with pain. You needed my money. That's all you ever needed. And I was stupid enough to give you everything. He turned to me, His eyes were full of tears. "Mom, I didn't know. I had no idea. I thought. I thought you were jealous. I thought you couldn't accept that I'd grown up. But it was her. All this time, it was her." His voice broke. "My son, my boy," crying in front of everyone, destroyed. I wanted to hug him, but I stopped myself. Not yet. First, I had to finish what I started. First, I had to make sure Jessica could never hurt him again. "Ethan, she was going to have you sign an $800,000 mortgage next week for a house that was going to be in her name, with fake documents saying her family put down the down payment. You were going to go into debt for 30 years for a house that would never have been yours." Mark showed the emails, the documents from the real estate agent, the entire plan, detailed, ready to be executed. All that was missing was Ethan's signature. Just one more week of deception, one more week of lies, and my son would have been financially trapped forever. The guests weren't hiding their shock anymore. They were talking amongst themselves, pointing at Jessica. Some were leaving, others were on their phones. By tomorrow, the whole city would know what happened tonight. Jessica Davenport would be socially destroyed. No one in that circle would ever trust her again. No one would ever welcome her. Her reputation was finished. Jessica collapsed. She fell onto the sofa, sobbing. She wasn't trying to defend herself anymore. She wasn't trying to explain. She just cried because she knew she had lost. That everything she had worked for, everything she had built on lies, had come crashing down in one night. At one dinner, because of one mother-in-law she had underestimated. Ethan walked over to me. He took my hands. "Mom, forgive me. Please, forgive me. I was an idiot, a blind fool. I treated you so badly. I pushed you away. I made you feel like you didn't matter. And all because I believed her lies." His words came out in gasps, between sobs. My son was crying, and I finally let the tears fall too. I hugged him, tight, tighter than I had hugged him in 3 years, the way I used to hug him when he was a boy, and the world hurt him. And I was his refuge, his protection, his home. "It's okay, honey. It's okay. It's over now. It's all over," I whispered against his head, and I felt him cling to me, as if I were the only solid thing in a world that had turned to liquid. The days that followed that dinner were strange. Ethan showed up at my apartment the next day, early. His eyes were swollen from crying. He had an expression I hadn't seen on his face in years, pure vulnerability. He sat on my old sofa, and for hours, he said nothing. He just sat there, like when he was a boy and would come looking for comfort after a hard day. I didn't try to fill the silence with words. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't bring up the 3 years of pain. I was just there, present, as I had always been, as I always would be. Because that's what mothers do. We take our children back when the world breaks them, without judgment, without reproaches, just with open arms. "Mom, how could I have been so blind?" He finally spoke. His voice was broken, ashamed. "How could I not see what she was? How could I let her treat you like that? Let me treat you like that?" He covered his face with his hands, and he cried again. The tears of a man who discovers he built his life on lies. I sat down next to him. I took his hand. The same hand I held when he took his first steps. The same hand I bandaged when he fell off his bike. The same hand that now trembled with pain and regret. "She is very good at manipulating, Ethan. She chose you because she knew you were noble, that you were trusting, that you loved with your whole heart. It's not your fault for believing in someone who said she loved you. But it is my fault for pushing you away, for treating you like you didn't matter, for making you feel like you were the problem." He looked at me with those eyes that looked so much like mine, the eyes he inherited from me. "Mom, I will never be able to apologize enough. I'll never be able to make up for those 3 years. I don't need you to make up for anything. I just need you to never again forget where you came from. Who was there when you had nothing? Who loved you, even when you stopped loving me?" My voice was soft, no resentment, because resentment doesn't build bridges. And I needed to get my son back, not punish him. Ethan moved back into a small apartment. He left the house he shared with Jessica. He started divorce proceedings. Mark helped him with the legal documents, with the lawsuits to recover at least part of the stolen money. It would be a long, painful process, but a necessary one. Jessica tried to call him several times. She sent him long texts, letters, begging for another chance, promising she would change, that it had all been a misunderstanding. But Ethan didn't answer. He had learned his lesson. He had seen the truth, and there was no going back. The Davenport family tried to threaten lawsuits, public scandals, but Mark had everything documented, every lie, every fraud, every manipulation, and they knew it. They knew that if they took this to court, they would lose even more than they already had. So they stayed quiet, humiliated, socially destroyed. Sundays became ours again. Ethan came to my apartment every week. We ate together, we talked. We laughed sometimes, we cried others, rebuilding what Jessica had destroyed, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, hug by hug. One Sunday, 2 months after that dinner, Ethan arrived with a box. "Mom, I found this stored in the garage of the house." Jessica had hidden them. He opened the box. It was the photographs. All the pictures of our life together, the ones that had disappeared from his house. The ones Jessica had erased. There they were. Ethan as a baby. Ethan at his first communion. Ethan graduating. The two of us, smiling at every stage of his life. I'm going to frame them. I'm going to put them up in my new apartment. Because I am never going to forget who was there, who loved me when I had nothing, who sacrificed everything so I could have a better life. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Forgive me, Mom. Please, forgive me. I already forgave you, honey. The day you were born, I forgave you for anything you could ever do in this life." I hugged him, and I felt that we had finally come back, that my son had returned to me, not the boy he was, but the man he should have always been, a man who knew the value of loyalty, of true love, of family. Months later, I ran into Margaret at the grocery store. She hugged me tight. "Helen, you look different. You look at peace." And she was right. I was at peace. Because I no longer carried the weight of injustice. I no longer lived wondering what I had done wrong. I no longer felt invisible. I had gotten my dignity back, not by begging, not by pleading, but by defending myself, by showing the truth, by refusing to be the silent victim everyone expected me to be. And in doing so, I didn't just save myself, I saved my son. Ethan now calls me 3 times a week. He visits every Sunday. He includes me in his life, not as an obligation anymore, but as a choice, as someone who wants to be there, who values my presence, who understands what he lost during those 3 dark years. Sometimes he asks me how I could forgive him so easily, how I could take him back without reproaches, without making him pay for the pain he caused. And I tell him the truth, because a mother's love isn't conditional. It's not a love that keeps score. It's a love that forgives, that waits, that never gives up. But I also tell him that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, that the scars are still there, invisible but real, and that he will have to live with the knowledge that he hurt the person who loved him most. That is his burden. That is his lesson. And it's a lesson he needed to learn. One afternoon, while we were having coffee in my living room, Ethan said something I'll never forget. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for fighting. Because if you hadn't, I would have lost everything. My money, my dignity, and worst of all, I would have lost you. And that would have been the most terrible thing of all." I smiled, a calm, serene smile. The smile of someone who fought and won. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with truth, with dignity, with the quiet strength that only mothers know. "I was never going to give up on you, honey. Never. Because you are my life, my purpose, my reason to keep going." Today, I am 67 years old. I live in the same small apartment. I wear the same simple clothes. I eat the same simple food. I have no luxuries. I have no riches. But I have my son. I have his love. I have his respect. I have his presence. And that is worth more than all the diamonds and big houses in the world. Jessica left town. I heard she moved back in with her parents. That no one in her social circle ever spoke to her again. That her reputation was destroyed for good. I don't feel pleasure at her downfall, but I don't feel pity either. She chose her path. She chose lies, manipulation, deceit, and choices have consequences. I learned something from all of this. I learned that silence isn't always peace, that putting up with things isn't always love, that sometimes you have to fight, you have to defend yourself, you have to say enough, and you have to do it without fear, without guilt, with the certainty that defending your dignity is never wrong. We mothers do not have to accept mistreatment from our children just because we love them. We do not have to disappear to make room for their new lives. We do not have to become ghosts of our former selves. We deserve respect. We deserve love. We deserve to be present. And if that respect doesn't come willingly, then we have to demand it, with truth, with proof, with the firmness of someone who knows they are right. Because in the end, the truth always wins. Always. It may take time. It may hurt. It may cost tears and sleepless nights. But it always, always wins. Today, I look out the window of my apartment. I see the sun setting over the city, and I smile. Because I survived. Because I fought. Because I got back what was mine. My son. My dignity. My peace. And no one, ever again, will take it from me. I promise that. To myself. To all the mothers who stay silent when they should scream. To all the women who disappear when they should shine. Luxury is destroyed. Appearances fall. Money runs out. But true love, the kind that asks for nothing in return, the kind that forgives but doesn't forget, the kind that fights when necessary, that love remains. And I am living proof of it.